So today I kind of want to spend a little bit of time talking about the decline of thinking among readership. And there are still some things that I still struggle with, that I'm still processing and thinking through. But I think it's important that we continue to process and think about things. Not necessarily that we have all the answers, but that we allow ourselves to question things and to have dialogue and to have discussions. And I hope that this is a step in that direction. Now, it's no surprise, at least it shouldn't be, with how many different articles and studies have come out showing that people have actually suffered a decline in thought. There's a lot of dumbing down of people. People are not as smart as they used to be. This has been, publicized a lot lately, and I don't think anybody's overly surprised at that. I'm not even going to give sources to that because it's so widespread. It's like widespread knowledge. You can just Google search it and you're going to find like 100 different things. So I'm not going to waste time with that. But readers have always been seen as kind of like above the casual person, that they are smarter than the average person. But even among readers, you're seeing kind of a dumbing down, where there are just a lot of inconsistencies. Now, I'm not going to try to give a complete full answer to any of these things, but I hope to kind of spur discussion, maybe not necessarily just in my comment section, but just in their own lives. So let me just kind of break this down. You can first off tell that there's some sort of an issue developing by the way that when you watch booktubers or book talkers, they are afraid to share their own opinion of anything, and they have to give this adequate, substantial disclaimer warning that the views expressed are their own, and it's okay if you don't agree with them. Obviously, those things. Now, I know that some of it is just for the sake of self-preservation, because when you say something, there's going to be 100 different people who are just angry at you, and I get that. I imagine there's going to be some people who are angry with what I say in this video. But I guess that's just the problem of having an opinion, is people will, shoot you for it. Now, I would say be careful with who you share opinion with, and don't be one of those people who's always preaching and sharing your opinions about everything. But let's get on with it. In a recent post from September 11th, J.K. Rowling said, "If you believe free speech is for you but not your political opponents, you're illiberal. If no contrary evidence could change your beliefs, you're a fundamentalist. If you believe the state should punish those with contrary views, you're totalitarian." I said that right, I think. "If you believe political opponents should be punished with violence or death, you're a terrorist." So there's a lot of things we could say about this post. But the thing I want to get across here is, back in my day, people used to be very one-sided. So, in other words, if I was to say fundamentalist, you would think of conservative, probably Christian, probably Republican. There's just certain thoughts that went with it. But nowadays, that's not necessarily the case. And I think that this post from J.K. Rowling really gets that point across that I'm trying to get across. So there are 5 things specifically that I want to look at that I kind of see as proofs that the culture is getting dumbed down. The first one is, should you separate the art from the artist? This is an ongoing discussion, an ongoing point of contention between people. I mean, it's very, very common nowadays for people to join in with the group and say, look, I don't read so-and-so because they said X, Y, and Z. Or, man, they really suck, and I still read their books, but I don't agree with what they said about X, Y, Z. Like, we have to let everybody know, hey, I'm not one of them. And it's like, there always has to be these disclaimers to everything. Back in the day, people used to say, hey, I read Harry Potter. Well, then that wasn't good enough, because all the Christians were, hey, this Christian author J.K. Rowling shouldn't have written this book because it has witches in it. Forget the fact that C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien did the same thing. Oh, that's evil because this is somehow different. Okay? So she writes this book and the Christians are after her. Well, that finally died down, mostly. And now there's, it was swung the other side, the other way, where people are saying, oh, get rid of J.K. Rowling because she said this. So she said such and such. Okay? Well, at least the Christians were complaining about the books. Like, at least they were staying on topic. It's very common for people to say this kind of stuff. Oh, how to support an author when they suck. It's like, what are you talking about? What? A prime example is the J.K. Rowling situation, where she said some things that some people deemed as anti-trans. I think that disagreeing is not hate, and I think that people sometimes combine those things. If you love, you're just going to completely agree with everything. That's not true. Moving on, people will treasure how they feel about something rather than what the truth is about that thing. They don't really want the scientific fact unless it agrees with what they already wanted to believe anyways. But I want to throw a little curveball at this whole discussion about what J.K. Rowling did or didn't say, and that's, does it really matter what J.K. Rowling believes? Does it matter? Let's say she does hate trans people. Let's say that, okay? Does it matter for reading the book or not? Does she advocate trans hate in her books? Well, no. She's not calling for the unaliving of the LGBT community. I'm a Christian. There's a lot of times that people will make fun of me and my beliefs. I don't see that necessarily as Christian hate. Then there's going to be other things that is very obviously Christian hate when they say, hey, all religion is a cult and we'd be better off just killing them all off. Well, now we're crossing the line of Christian hate. So speaking from somebody who is not really in good view in the community in the world today, in the Western world today, I feel like, the trans community used to be out of favor, and now they're kind of getting into favor, and as they're getting into favor, we're now saying things that aren't necessarily true. And I think that that's kind of hurting the community more so than questioning the beliefs would. Now, as a kid, I grew up in the Christian culture, and in the Christian culture, it's very common to boycott anything and everything. Like every month or every year, there were new things to boycott, from Starbucks for something to do with a Christmas cup, I forget that one actually, to, Target for one of the people who made some of the clothing that they were selling or something, I don't know, whatever. Anyways, long story short, there was always something to boycott. It's very similar to the cancel culture of today. And so whereas Christians would say, hey, don't do this because it's a problem with our conscience, now we're saying, hey, don't cancel all this because it might offend somebody. It's not even necessarily it does offend me, but rather I'm afraid that it might hurt somebody's feelings somewhere, somehow. And so it's not even a thing about a moral issue, because there really are no morals. It's just my own personal offense. And so if my offenses are key, then that just means that everything is up to me and how I feel about it. But what happens when you have two different people who one is offended by something and one is not offended? Well, our culture says always cater to the one who is offended. But what happens when that doesn't go to the mainstream? Like, for instance, here's a great idea. Let's say I do not like trans people. I'm totally against them, okay? Now, let's say if somebody promoting trans is offending me, well, then we would say, well, you just need to get over it. You need to be welcoming and accepting and all this different stuff. So we're not really sticking even with the same thing, and we don't really have any basis for it. And now here's the problem, is we're getting into a place of saying there can't be a dialogue or discussion about it either. You just have to blindly accept and affirm, and that's just the end of it. So when we're looking at J.K. Rowling, I really don't feel like it matters too much for whether or not you read Harry Potter. I feel like that has nothing to do with the conversation at all. There's this thing where we have to dig up all the dirt on somebody, and even if it was things from years ago, dig up the dirt and make sure that's the one thing. It's like, what? And we've deluded ourselves into thinking that we're more righteous, more holy than them, and we would never say something like that. It's like, even though it's a really good thing people don't know the things that are going on in your head, but okay. A great example of this would be, hey, it's wrong, hate crimes are wrong, but I tell you what, if somebody would kill the president, things would be a lot better. Well, it's like, well, isn't that kind of a hate crime, though? Surely you see how that kind of thinking is dangerous. It's not even affirming, it's just dangerous. But in this cancel culture that I experienced as a Christian, there was just a lot of boycott this and boycott that. And I had to come to the point of, no, I can shop at Walmart and not agree with everything that all the workers say and all the CEOs say, or even the organization believes, right? There are going to be some times when I read a book that I don't like what the author is getting at. I don't like what the author personally believes, and I'm still going to go along with it. Now, there are exceptions to that. As it pertains to author, I will not agree 100% with any author that I read. And even if there was an author that I massively agreed with, there's still going to be some things that I disagree with them on. So where's the line of things I can disagree with them on and still, be okay? So when you're looking at all these different things, everybody's going to have their own personal preference of what they can and cannot endure. But with that being said, J.K. Rowling didn't have anything in the book that was somehow causing people to have to think real hard. It was rather something that she personally believes that really has nothing to do with the book itself at all. And if you don't agree with it, that's fine. Move on with your life. It's like Facebook, right? You see a post you don't agree with, just keep scrolling and live your life, right? But there needs to be this idea that a lot of times live and let die, right? Or live and let live. Sorry, live and let live. I got caught up in James Bond just then. Live and let live. And then there's other things that we do need to have discussions on, but we don't always have to be the one to have that discussion. Let me just say it like this. There needs to be a willingness for discussion, even if we aren't always policing everything and entering into discussions about everything. You know what I mean? Still that thing where it's not sacred and it's not something where I cannot talk about this. You know, there has to be discussions about these kinds of things. And I really don't feel comfortable with the way that the discussion of trans is being put on a higher pedestal than a discussion on God. Like, oh, you can make fun of God and that's fine, but you make fun of trans and that's not okay. It's like, well, pause. Well, hold on. God's not real. It's like, yeah, I understand your view on that, but I also would say, well, but they're saying that trans aren't real either. So I'm not sure, once again, that argument really tracks. I feel like people are being flippant about things because they don't want to believe it, but then there's other things that they don't want to be flippant on because they do want to believe that, or they just at least don't want to be seen as hateful. Because once you're deemed as hateful, that's the end. You're canceled, the end of the conversation. And it's okay if you're hateful against the people who you think are hateful, but you just can't be hateful to the people who, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, what? What? Like, the recent hate being shown to J.R.R. Tolkien. What? That's wild. Or the hate being shown to the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know, guys. This is just, what a world we live in. What a world. And so, yeah, I'm going to disagree with everybody to some degree, probably more than likely. If nothing else, we'll probably disagree on which way the toilet paper roll should go. But if the author starts advocating things you see as evil, I would understand why that could be a problem. But once again, even if they do advocate it, shouldn't we engage in some kind of a dialogue and critically analyze things when at least reasonable? And there has to be some kind of, refining your beliefs. And some people would say, and I would say that they would be right, that there is a difference between grooming a kid like Cormac McCarthy did versus not believing in smoking, and I understand that. But we're not really discussing the existence of morality, we're discussing books. In any of Cormac McCarthy's books, does he condone grooming kids? If he does that mean I shouldn't read it? See, these are a bunch of really difficult questions that I feel like we're just dismissing. And I'm still weighing them, and I still haven't figured it all out. Maybe I never will, but I'm willing to have this conversation. But how do you realistically gauge the threat level about whether or not something is, top-tier threat or a lower-level threat? How do you do that? What do you base that off of? Because some things might be obvious to you, and it's not obvious to somebody else. Let's say, for instance, you have a Christian and an atheist. And a Christian is saying, it's obvious to me that homosexuality is wrong. And then an atheist is saying, it's obvious to me that homosexuality is not wrong. So what do you base that off of? Like, where is that threat level gauged from? Is it threatening to you or to somebody else? Is it threatening physically or is it threatening emotionally? Because sometimes people say, well, I'm offended. It's threatening me and everything. It was like, no, they were just saying something that you didn't like or didn't agree with, which is okay, right? Not everybody's going to walk on glass for you. Is it a moral issue or is it a religious issue? Because there is a difference there. And we're told over and over and over again by the book community, hey, you don't have to believe everything you read. That's the whole reason why I read the Chronicles of the Black Company. It's very much so opposed to my beliefs as a Christian, but I read it because, hey, I don't have to believe everything that I read. I can read a book written by a merc group and understand that mercenaries aren't real religious people. I understand that, right? But then there's kind of this double-faced thing that's happening. So like here, the great example is Stephen King. Stephen King has written books that have sexual content with kids. And so then people would say, well, that Stephen King is a pedophile. While other people would say, no, you can have things in books and still not agree with them. Well, we're not even talking about something that is in a book. We're talking about something that the author personally shared an opinion about something, and they're seen as not good, cancel them. And it's like, well, it just seems kind of disingenuous, and it seems like we're all catering to something that we're not even sure what we're catering to anymore. It's like, well, why can't we give each other the same level of grace? Like, why do we have to only give grace if it's something we really want to believe and not give grace when it's something we don't want to believe? It's okay to just say, well, my feelings are hurt, so I'm not going to refute the idea. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist and only surround myself with people who think just like me. That's how thinking dies. When you try to police things like that so heavily, it's just never going to work. Do you have to go looking for people's worldview and sins before you read their works? Like, hey, I was going to read Chronicle of the Black Company, but I have not personally talked to Glenn Cook and asked him, hey, what is your view on trans people? Like, do we really have to do that? Is it realistically something that we're trying to do? Now, everyone has flaws and sins. I get that. But books are meant for discerning people, and if you're not a discerning person, you're going to have a hard time. So then the second little thing that I feel like really shows the decline of thinking among readership. Now, this is very heavy, and I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this, and I'm going to try to give them to you basic idea, and then I'm going to try to expand a little bit. So the basic idea is the argument around should books be banned. There's a lot of people that just kind of hop on the anti-books banning wagon without much thought. But there's two main problems with this. The first main problem is that books aren't really banned in the Western world. Like, that's not really a thing. You can always buy it somewhere. Like, it's not really banned. Banned means it's gotten rid of. You can't get it. Like in China is a great example of this. You can get it. Banned, just in American context, just means that you're removing them from certain audiences. So the question is, should you remove them from certain audiences? Which brings me to my second point. Yes, some books should be banned from certain age groups. Even you, an adult, should be selective in the things that you allow in your body, whether it's things that you eat in your mouth, things you think in your mind, things you allow in your spiritual life. Now, obviously, you control what you allow, but you can't control the rest of the world and what they allow. You can't control the fact that it exists. However, if someone is too young or incapable of making the decision themselves, you absolutely do have to make the choice for them. Somebody who's on life support, for instance, or kids, great example. So let me just kind of give you a more concrete example. Does the Kama Sutra belong in a children's library? No! You would say even ban it from that kid's library because it doesn't belong there, right? That's what the discussion is about. Banning books makes good sense in some contexts. Now, there are some books I do not allow my kids to read, and I encourage others to not let their kids to read because the content is too much for their age level to critically analyze. That's not to say that they should never read that book, with some exceptions, but not that they shouldn't do it from an early age. Now, some I allow them to read, but we discuss it. You know what I mean? I don't just leave them on their own. As they get older, I allow them to read some books, and we discuss it. Okay. But there's some things that people are just one-sided on, and the banned book issue is... So then there's the people who will come in here and say, well, okay, so you should be teaching your kids how to think. Yes, but don't overwhelm them at a young age. And then you have other people saying, don't brainwash them, and I hear you, and I agree with you to a certain extent. Here's the thing. No art is objective. And everything brainwashes us, from the way that people treat us, to the things that we read, to the things that we watch. I mean, think of, for instance, how many different commercials we watch that are subliminally impressing us about, like, for instance, alcohol. If you drink this alcohol, you'll be happy. If you do this makeup, you'll be seen as beautiful. All these different subliminal messages we're getting all day on the TV, and that's totally fine brainwashing, but then it comes to, conversations about books, and it's just a whole different thing. Like, people have completely turned off their brain. Now, I would say don't brainwash kids to amoral or immoral ideologies and views. Take great care what you're brainwashing them to, but realize that no matter what you do, they're going to be brainwashed one way or another. If you spanked your kids right then, your kids are going to grow up to either believe in and spanking, or they're going to go to the opposite extreme and say, no kid should ever be spanked for anything. Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. It's just the way the world works. So don't make up their mind for them, especially as they get older. Yeah, absolutely. But engage them in dialogue, and you should still point them in the right direction. Parents should not be objective. They should very much be the foundation for their life. And some are given the foundation of, hey, there is no right or wrong except what you feel. And this is where the mistake is, because we're teaching kids not to enter into that dialogue, not to think critically about things, and just to kind of accept it. What really makes this a problem is that we are, in essence, setting our kids up for failure, because we're silencing critical thought. Like when we told our kids, hey, You can be whatever you want to be. That's just not true, though. Realistically, you can try really, really hard and still not get to be something. Saying that they are a dog, for instance, and expect them not to get made fun of. That's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. Now, obviously, bullying is a problem anyways, and then bullying among people who are acting different from others to such a big degree is going to cause even more bullying. That's the reality of the world. You don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. We have to learn how to accept somebody, agree to disagree, and, not believe the same thing just because somebody else does. We should also learn how to filter what we allow in our own lives, though. Now, this is going to be subjective to the individual. Some people don't really have any restrictions on themselves. Some people have a bunch of restrictions. And what I would say is we should have some kind of wisdom, I would like to think, and avoid some things. Discussions, by and large, have to continue even when we don't engage with the art. And with that being said, absolutely, you don't have to engage with the art. There's sometimes when you just should not engage with the art. And this is really subjective a lot of times. But you should still challenge your thinking even when you're not engaging with the art. And I don't need to justify myself for my own standard in my own belief system. See what I mean? Like, you don't have to do that. Let's just circumnavigate all this discussion and say, look, everyone gets on the bandwagon against banned books with little actual thought. And that's one of the things I feel like is a proof that our readership is getting dumbed down. The third thing I would say is when talking about books, everyone believes there's no such thing as an objectively bad book, that everything is relative, that all tastes are relative, but that's just simply not true. Books can be poorly written. We would all agree with that. They can have poor structure, poor story arcs, poor character development. Objectively, these are bad things, right? And so a book can be objectively bad or have some things that are objectively bad in them, at least. Yet you can subjectively enjoy an objectively bad book. That's your opinion, not facts. Facts is whether a book is objectively bad or not. Subjective is your opinion, whether you enjoyed it or not. And you can enjoy something that's bad, that's totally fine. You can be a fan of something that, sucks. And that's fine, that's your own opinion. The fact is, Twilight is not a very well-written book. Past whether you like the idea, the aesthetics, or whatever, or you have childhood memories, whatever, objectively, it is not a very well-written book. I mean, you get to the last one, for instance, and not only was that nonsense with the whole Jacob thing, like, gross, but then there's a whole thing with the way she repeats herself over and over and over again, past it simply being a young adult book, past that. There's just a lot of repetition. The sentence structures are not that well developed. The writing's real basic. The story's real basic. I mean, it's not really something that you go into thinking this is a literary masterpiece, right? Like maybe over here you have War and Peace or Les Miserables, and then over here would be Twilight. It's just not equal. We all agree with that. Now, objectively, Twilight is not a very good book. It's not a very well-written book. Subjectively, you may enjoy it. You can enjoy whatever you want. That is your personal taste. Now, as you develop as a reader, your taste is going to change even more so. Something that you thought was really bad, you might come to enjoy later on. That's fine. And it's fine for you to have books that, other people say, you can't read that book. Now, with that being said, if you're going to read 50 Shades of Grey, please don't do it in audiobook with your window down. Moving on. But an inability to acknowledge absolutes and facts is contributing to the dumbing down of our culture. We can't admit that we may be wrong and we hate things that challenge our views. And then we'll believe absolute statements like there are no absolutes when that is an absolute. We won't see the irony of those things. I mean, just look at the way that mainstream liberals and mainstream conservatives have both tried to shut each other up and shut each other down instead of engage each other in dialogue. It's just not overly helpful. A lot of just, we're not going to listen to them, or we're just going to make fun of them, and we're not going to actually take their thought process to heart. It's just both sides are doing it, and everybody says, "Oh, no, that's the other guy that's doing it." It's like, no, that's not, and that's part of the reason that everything is getting dumbed down. Everything is based off of fear tactics. Everything's based off of mob mentalities. How in the world can we have critical thinking with those kinds of things? The fourth thing, we find personal preferences bad if they don't mirror our own. So, look, I'm a straight man. Okay, I'm a straight man. And most straight men that I know don't like reading books with gay dudes kissing. That's just it. That doesn't mean that we're homophobic. That just means we're not gay. Now, a lot of girls that I know like the aesthetics of gay romance in their books, and that's great for them. Hey, hurrah. But if I say gross, a gay sex scene, or whatever, I'm seen as homophobic, even if I am supportive of gays and the gay community and believe in equal rights. That doesn't mean that I want to see them doing their equal rights. Just because I don't, I agree that they should have the right to do something, does not mean that I want to see them partake of that right in front of my eyes. You know what I mean? Like, not into that. And once again, but our culture has this idea that everything's so cut and dry, narrow. On a more humorous note, equal treatment should mean equal treatment, right? If I can get made fun of being a Christian, then hey, gays can get made fun of for not being one, right? But obviously you see that I'm joking, but there is a kernel of truth in that statement, that equal treatment sometimes for some people means special treatment, and special treatment is not equal treatment. You can either believe in equal treatment or you can believe in special treatment, whichever way that goes. For instance, a lot of times Christians feel like they should be given special treatment in the community instead of equal treatment, right? Equal treatment means that it's okay for people to worship Satan and Jesus. Both parties are welcome. That's equal treatment. Special treatment is people can only worship Jesus, no Satanists allowed. I don't like gay love in my books, not because I hate gays, not at all, but because that's not my preference on a psychological level as well as on religious grounds. That's just not, no. Some people will see my view as immoral based on their own social views, though, which is where things really get confusing. Which one of our views is superior, then? Which one has to be killed off to make way for the other one? Well, to me, I think my view is right and their view is wrong. To them, they think their view is right and my view is wrong. Respecting other people's views and preferences is a big part of thinking, because you have to understand that you can't make them believe what you want them to believe. You have to accept them. You have to allow that they will come to their own conclusion, and no amount of argument will really get them past that. You know what I mean? We don't need to surround ourselves with people who think just like us unless our views are too weak to stand up to scrutiny, in which case we need to refine them. We don't have to be best friends with people we fundamentally are opposed to, but that doesn't mean we have to demonize one another either. Surely there's an area where we say, hey, I don't agree with you on this. Okay. Have gay books, but I'm not the market any more than a gay man is the market for straight romance. You get that? Further, and this is where things might get confusing for some people, I actually believe that there should be gay characters in books. And people would say, well, hold on though, you're a Christian, isn't it a sin? And I would say, it really doesn't matter whether it's a sin or not, and not in life, I mean in books. Sins do matter, okay, I'm not trying to say that, but in a book, it really doesn't matter if there's a sinner in a book or not. Because, hey, there's druggies in the books that I read, there's alcoholics, there's murderers, there's other things. Why shouldn't there be gay people too? I'm not sure that makes sense that, hey, we can have a book about a homicidal maniac, but just don't let him be gay. He can cut off fingers, he can do all this stuff, but God, please don't let him be gay. And obviously, hopefully you see, just how silly that is. But there are some things that I won't touch in books. If something feels off, I'm not going to participate. I don't have to give a justification for that either, because I have my own beliefs. Same thing is true for you. You should be able to critically think, absolutely, but that doesn't mean you have to justify yourself to every person. So the fifth thing that I feel like really is a valid proof that critical thinking is on the decline is that not only are our personal preferences offensive to many, but challenging views about religion, sexuality, truth are ridiculed and avoided like the plague. You can't avoid these kinds of things. Anyone who asks questions is now the enemy. They're now hateful. Whether we are talking about people questioning MAGA, whether we're talking about people questioning transgenderism, whether we're talking about people questioning global warming, whether we're talking about people questioning Trump's policies, whatever it is, the other side is an idiot, they're sheep, and, whatever. And it's like, well, that's just not acceptable. I've seen a lot of times where people will say unaliving somebody because they're part of the trans community is wrong, and I would agree, but then they'll say it's okay to murder the president because he's whatever. And it's like, well, hold on, though. You're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. So it's okay to murder some people you disagree with, but not okay for other people to murder the people that they disagree with, and I don't get that. Either life is sacred or it's not sacred. I don't get how everybody thinks that their thing is okay to commit murder on, but the other person's isn't. So in conclusion, this is what we can all get to, okay? This was a long discussion. Like I say, I don't have it all figured out, but here's the thing. In conclusion, we need to respect each other. But we also need to be okay with topics that cause us discomfort to a degree in some ways. So I know that that's not really as definitive as I would like. I like things to be real cut and dry. Here's black and white and everything. But ultimately what it comes down to is there needs to be more discussion. We need to be able to think about these things, and we need to be okay with not blacklisting things just because it makes us feel bad, but is it actually bad? I think that's maybe a good distinction to make. Do I not agree with it, or is it wrong? Do I say it's wrong, or is it actually wrong? Does it feel wrong, or is it actually wrong? And I guess maybe it is a deeper discussion on the existence of morality and religion and those kinds of things. But on a real surface level, it's basically, let's not talk about it at all. Just demonize these people. We can all agree that they're wrong, that they're the problem. And I feel like that shouldn't be happening with readers. We should be more thinking people than that. And I guess that's where it really comes down to. Critical thinking has to start being a normative part of our lives. Even as we read books, even as we're reading fiction books, critical thinking should still be a very active and valid part of our lives. But hey, let me know what you thought about these different things. I don't no hateful nonsense or anything. Don't keep it civil, but you can have differing opinions. That's really fine.